Hey, it's Stu, and this is a book review for the last, I don't know, 10 days or something of reading. Maybe more. I don't know. Um, anyway, this is a reading review of books that I've read, mostly falling under my Black History Month reading, with a couple of just random picks in here that I did sort of just spontaneously, so I don't even think any of these are picks for the 52 book club's prompts. Yeah, anyway, here we go. In the last review video, I mentioned Jasmine Guillory's Flirting Lessons and said that I was liking it. I had just read some really, The Other Wife by Sadika Johnson and Homegoing by Gyase, and they were fantastic reads, very heavy, meaningful and heavy stories. So I wanted just something lighter and more lighthearted, and what better place to turn than to love? As I'm filming this video on Valentine's Day, I thought that I would include it, although I already said a few things about it in my last video. I liked that Guillory wrote kind of the internal workings of the characters and their insecurities. I found the character development, to be fair, and again, this is just me as a romance reader, being not a romance reader. I don't have sort of standards for my romance because I'm not really a romance reader. I wasn't super compelled by the character development. I did like the internal nature of this writing, and I thought, for me, I guess I'm just getting old and fuddy-duddy, that the characters seemed a lot younger than their on-page age. But other than that, it did exactly what I wanted it to do, which was, sort of lighten the mood a little. Speaking of a book that I don't know if it lightened the mood. I think it was quite harrowing, actually, and atmospheric and lovely. Like, it was such a joy to read. I really had fun reading this book, and that's Muckleflugga by Michael Pedersen. This just came, and I wish I would have paid attention to what YouTuber was talking about it while I was, dusting or something. But that's how I came to know this book. And it's a story. Muckleflugga is an island off it's the northernmost island, I believe, in Scotland, and there's a lighthouse, and this is the story of a father and a son in this really harsh climate, and this Michael Pedersen, I believe, was a maybe renowned, if not award-winning poet turned proser, and I'm a fan. Ocean Vuong also working for me. I like poets moving into prose, and I really liked the way this book was written, the exploration of the relationship between the father and the son, between the nature, the introduction of a third character, which is kind of the outsider and the outsider's point of view. And of course, the the invented friend, or not, the friend of the son, who is the ghost of Robert Louis Stevenson, who's called RLS in the book, was a much needed and wanted addition to the book. Pedersen, having combed through the works of Robert Louis Stevenson, and every time the ghost talks, there are quotes from the large body of work of RLS, as he's called in the book. Yeah, I just really enjoyed this book, and I have since put it on several of my reading friends' reading list under high recommendation by me. Once I finished Muckleflugga, I read Crook Manifesto by Colson Whitehead, and I can't tell you between Harlem Shuffle and Crook Manifesto which I liked better. What I can tell you is that like an extended work, I liked them. The third one of the Ray Carney trilogy is coming out in 2026. I don't think that I'm going to go through any extra effort to find it. Maybe I could get it just, from my library, but I did find Harlem Shuffle and Crook Manifesto together, thrifting, yes, that's how I find all my books. And I read Harlem Shuffle in January, Crook Manifesto in just recently. And here, Harlem Shuffle starts in Harlem in the late 1950s, early 1960s, or maybe the mid 60s, if I'm not conflating. And then we follow the same character, Ray, into the 1970s. We get some looks at some side characters, and crime fiction really isn't my genre, but Colson Whitehead's writing is great. Of course, I could criticize any book that has such limited female characters. And do. I do have that criticism of this series. And what I want and need from reading, there's plenty. There's a whole canon of books that don't include any female characters, or the female characters are, in this case, wives and sex workers, and very limited in their scope in the book. But I do appreciate, I think I said this under the review of Harlem Shuffle, that this really is an ode to Harlem. It's Colson Whitehead's love story or love letter to Harlem. And I really, really, really appreciated how Colson Whitehead writes and creates setting in both these books. I really liked exploring Harlem as a setting. Which leads me to the next book, which I listened to. Toni Morrison, the late, the great, read this to me herself, because the audio production is read by Toni Morrison, and that is Jazz. And Jazz also has a setting of Harlem, and with all Toni Morrison, and particularly in listening, this was a very difficult book to listen to, first because of the depth of Toni Morrison's writing. It is really dense, and it's dense work, and there's a lot of depth, and it can take you into really far away places that I just don't have the skills yet in audio. I did much love her reading it to me, and I have the physical copy, but I was on the bus. It was a 4-hour audio, so I was on the bus for most of the time and wasn't able to follow along. I think to my detriment. There was also some like music in the background, which made it hard to listen. It's an older production. That was just about my experience about the book. You know, we follow a character, some characters. There's a love triangle. There's a man who's cheating on his wife, who kills his mistress. And then the wife shows up at the funeral and tries to harm the already deceased mistress. And what I can say about maybe all of Toni Morrison's writing, although I haven't read her in such a long time, but this is the impression that I'm still carrying now, is that the characters of Toni Morrison carry so much. They carry so much. It is, when you read a Toni Morrison book and novel, it is very easy to understand that the single, it's not about the single life of the character. It's about all that they carry through their community, through the history, through their ancestors. And I felt that very much in this book. What I want to say about this book, and the experience I tried to have with this book in relation to, and why I picked it while reading Crook Manifesto, is because this setting is also Harlem in the 1920s, so the Harlem Renaissance, but we go in and out. I mean, the characters are followed through their time in the making of the Harlem Renaissance to the newly liberated or formerly enslaved, and then newly liberated folks whose stories are being told through this, and then the Great Migration. This book does a lot. It's so much. Fantastic work with the setting of Harlem as well. And I really think and would recommend actually doing it like I did, to just really get a rich and panoramic view of Harlem as told through two amazing authors. After that, I decided I needed something a little bit lighter and more even lighthearted. So I picked up All the Lonely People by Mike Gale. This was on my TBR. This had come under a few recommendations. And I guess the recommendation said, if you liked Um, Fredrik Backman, you'll like this. I can see why they said that. So in this book, we go to the setting of London, England, and we're going back and forth in timelines. And almost all of the book, all of the book is set in London, England, contemporary times. And the alternate timeline is the late 1950s, when our main character moves and migrates. And there's also kind of like the Great Migration, there's a movement of folks from Jamaica into England as part of this, the histories that we're exploring. We have an older character here, and he is lonely, and he meets his younger female. So the other character in this book is a neighbor, and she's new to the apartment building, and she has a daughter, and she really tries to bring this older man out of his shell and into, and they create a sort of coalition that tries to confront the loneliness that people experience in modern life in their elder years, in urban settings. It worked. Probably a little bit of Grumpy Sunshine. So if you're reading for the 52 book clubs, it could fit that. Him being a bit older and grumpy and as tropey and stereotypical as that is, and her being sort of young and ambitious. And this book, and we know that I'm now about to express my opinion, was not good. The writing was not good. And I know. I mean, I didn't do any book any favors by following it right after a Toni Morrison and a Colson Whitehead. So I realize that, your reading experience is so impacted by everything, including the books that you've just read by. The writing wasn't good. The tropes were, not well executed. There's a bit of a unreliable narrator, which I almost found as a Deus Ex Machina, in that, like, it was put in there to sort of like make the book interesting or as a twist, but it didn't need to be. And I don't think it added anything. And of course there are things that are, besides it just not being well written, the female character tells the older male protagonist that, whose name is, I think, Hubert. Yeah. She tells him, oh no, this woman said that she didn't want to date you, but she really does, because women always say they don't want you when they do. And you know what? I don't have time for that shit anymore. I'm sorry. Like, this book is published in the 2020s, and we can't be going back to, she's leading you on, or no doesn't mean no. And even if it doesn't necessarily have that series of consequences in this book, no. There's also a fat joke that's just, it wasn't even necessary. Now, just unfortunately, I hardly was able to finish this book, and I found that sad because I had a lot of anticipation. And for Fredrik Backman fans, Fredrik Backman, in my opinion, is an extraordinary writer who doesn't rely on tropes. Although all writing has tropes, but he doesn't rely on them for the entirety of his story. He's able to develop complex characters, and for a male author, is conscientious of how he writes females. Okay? That's just me going on my little Fredrik Backman diatribe. This was a story that, wanted and needed to be told. I'm just sad that it was told the way that it was. And this is a popular book. So for all the people that really like it, I'm glad you do. I struggled. Yeah, I struggled even finishing it. So I'm happy to put it out into a little free library. Again, it's a popular book, and somebody's going to be happy to find it. Because that setting was London, I decided to go ahead and give Keep the Aspidistra Flying by George Orwell, a book I found in a box, a try. It's an Orwell that I hadn't read, and I decided to listen to it. right away I was able to appreciate the craft again of Orwell's writing. And I found it's very dark and caustic, this book, and like sharp social criticism. And I found myself laughing out loud at some of the ways in which he really made his satire work. That being said, I wish this were a novella. By the middle of the book, this loathsome protagonist did nothing more than piss me off. And I think it really lost the edge of the social criticism when he just goes into nonstop self-loathing, which is self-induced. And the fact that he's a misogynist, Orwell is aware of. From what I can tell in this writing, it's deliberate. However, the way that he treats his girlfriend and insists that she has sex with him, and when she doesn't, he insists it's because it's about money, or whatever his own hang-up is deplorable and disgusting. When he gets drunk and assaults her, it's disgusting. And I don't think Orwell handled that well at all. I think we're meant to have some kind of compassion for this person who is a person but deserves none of my compassion. He's disgusting. He's self-loathing, and social commentary or not, the fact that he thinks that women's bodies exist just for him to sow into his self-loathingness results in things like, well, murder. That's where that, like, femicide, right? That's where that thinking leads. And I don't think Orwell did a very good job at all of raising any kind of awareness of that. He was very focused, as he often is, on the criticism of class. Worked for that until it didn't. So I'm not upset that I read this book. Of course, Orwell is just so good at writing. I don't know the reception of this book at all by others, contemporary or even in its time. I was thinking, oh, I'll keep it because I keep my classics. Nah, I can get rid of this too. While I was listening, because I was listening to this and I had finished All the Lonely People, it was a quick read. And the only thing that slowed me down was that I didn't want to read it anymore. I started reading The Sellout, which is also satire. And at one point I thought that the Orwell satire was working better. And then this book kind of annoyed me at first. So this is The Sellout by Paul Beatty. It was one of my Black History Month picks. And then this book grew on me and ended right. I thought for a while the story just wasn't moving, and I was like, it was like eating, when you get like you go to the sports diner and you get the burger or sandwich and it's like this big and it's got so many toppings and you try to eat it and it's falling out all over the place. That's kind of how my experience with this book was. It was super dense with nuance references to Hollywoodisms, to LA-isms, to Black cultureisms, to modern pop cultureisms, and to literature. So you kind of just had to get your bearings because it was just too much. And then the humor, and I think he's mentioned, the humor is sophisticated, but it can be a bit stand-uppy. I did read a reviewer say this is like stand-up. No, there's a lot more density than could happen in stand-up, but sort of like the self-loathing nature of stand-up. And again, Dave Chappelle is who I was trying to say earlier, is mentioned, and I do find a lot of the humor and a lot of his social criticism like aligned with how Dave Chappelle approaches his topics. I think that, speaking of, this book is incredibly confronting and self-aware and nuanced about race, and falls short about the sexism that it even uses. There's a little bit of awareness, but it just falls short. And I just found myself saying, I'm glad I read this book. Actually, there's several people I could recommend this book to and will. But after this trio, I honestly don't care if I read Sis Mills and people can be like, oh, you should be able to read openly. No, listen, the man's worldview and this like chalant and nonchalant sexism has been, I've been literally shoved it down my throat through all of my education. And I don't, I don't even think I'm missing out on some great things. Again, Paul Beatty winning the book, first American to win the Booker 2016. Happy for him, glad for him. There's like a lot of quoted, like I had also the digital versions because I give my books away so I could annotate lots and lots of quotable lines in this book. Could recommend it just with too much male's worldview, on top of too much male worldview. And if you even throw in that Colson Whitehead, just too much. Anyway, speaking of another male author, because I was in LA and I just kind of am trying to curate setting on setting, I decided to listen to, and this is like I had insomnia and couldn't sleep. And this was a very, very short listen. This is a novella, Open Throat by Henry Hoke. I have since recommended this book to several people. Nailed LA. The symbolism, I guess the allegory, this is an animal, right? This book is about a cougar, a wildcat living in the hills of LA, interacting with the unhoused population, and yeah. And it's a fantastic little short, witty social criticism on the housing crisis, on inequality, on human rights, on being queer in LA 2025. I think that book came out. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. In fact, I think almost the same intention of that Orwell book. Just, again, I wish the Orwell book was to be fair, George, I think the Keep the Aspidistra Flying was published in 1936. So yes, a classic. Very similar in their social criticisms and their use of satire. Yeah. Anyway, after that, just for fun, I also listened to, it was another sleep. So I get some sort of like, I wake up at 3 or 4, who doesn't do that? And then I have to listen to something for like an hour before I can fall back to sleep. And then I've been doing some walks. So I've been getting some listening in, and this was another short, maybe 3 or 4 hour listen. And that was The Midnight Timetable by Bora Chung. This is another book that and it's, by the way, the translator is Anton Her. This is another recommendation from a YouTuber who I didn't write down, and well, I obviously don't have very many subscribers, and mostly just my friends watch my channel, and sometimes I send these videos via different ways to other people. But if I were good at this thing called being a YouTuber, I would definitely put the link to whomever gave the recommendation for this. I also have recommended this along. I thought this was exactly, I really loved listening to Bora Chung's author's note at the end. It is what it is meant to be, which is a novel and interconnected ghost stories, and they are ghost stories. And they are mixing sort of lore, as ghost stories often do, and with just, the techniques of telling ghost stories without trying to be bigger or more than that. And I really appreciated everything about this book. I'm not even necessarily a ghost story reader. If you're somewhere like me, or like, I really appreciate horror for the way that it can use the symbolism, but wouldn't necessarily call myself a ghost story or horror or even gothic reader. This book is absolutely for you. The way that she interconnects the stories. There's an institute, sort of like a paranormal institute maybe, where these stories kind of converge. There's objects and animals that are sort of supernatural, and it's a great time. It's a really great time, and I appreciated it. I appreciated the awareness of female issues as told symbolically through some of those stories, especially after just 2 too much patriarchal, misogynistic male worldview in this reading group. Even even though I have a lot of good things to say, I'm like almost like blah. Need a cleanse. The Vanishing Half by Brit Bennett somewhat provided that for me. I'm happy we have a female author telling the story of two twin girls who are born in a small town in Louisiana, in a town that is a lot of light-skinned African-American people. This book confronts colorism and in some quite nuanced ways. It confronts needing to leave where you're from to become who you are, and it looks at what leaving a former self behind means through race, through gender, through upward mobility, and that's what The Vanishing Half is. Like, who and what did you leave behind? And, you know, was it worth it, or did you really? Yeah. We follow the lives of these two twins who got the heck out of Dodge because being from a little crappy small town has its limitations. One ends up back in town taking care of the mom because the series of events, and one doesn't. And in that way, it reminds me of Muckleflugga, meaning like Muckleflugga being a very harsh, and then this young boy being very isolated, but him also being confronted with, should he leave? Does he need to leave? And in that way, I can really relate. With some of the other themes, not as much, but I think Brit does a gentle and not very sophisticated, but a gentle and direct meditation on that, on loving yourself for who you are, on needing to leave where you are to be who you are, on needing to change who you are for other people to love you or for you to love yourself. Like, just looking at that from lots of different angles. Yeah. And I have a friend that I will give this book to. I think I liked Mothers more in some ways. Maybe I liked this story more, but the Craft of Mothers more by Brit Bennett. Yeah, it's been too long maybe between the two, but that's where I'm standing. This is an easy to read, like I said, pretty direct, pretty straightforward book that's telling stories and giving you people with whom to look at all of those themes and meditations that I just mentioned. And I think something like the writing craft of even, say Paul Beatty, is whiplash, like what writing, what density. And sometimes you just don't need the density. You can have things the water a little bit clearer, not so much going on, and still have a lot to think about for a long time. And I think Brit Bennett nailed that. There's a lot of books. Those novellas were like, there were several novellas in that pile as well. 2 classics. So yay me getting to classics, as I've been saying in previous videos that I'm just not reading my classics. I changed that around, and yeah, I feel like I have to shake up some of that. I can't read that many cis males, just me, in a row. I think I just can't. But I think with the one exception, I'm quite glad that even with that exception, I'm quite glad that I read everything. I'm quite glad that I give most books a chance all the way through to see what's trying to be done, at least what the story is trying to be told. I know that I have a lot of books, and all of these are unread because I read them and then give them away, and I haul only from thrift or Little Free Library. And I'm an avid user of my Friends of the Library bookstore. It's something I really believe in. So I'm still at a place where I I'm not trying to sow guilt about not DNFing. Like if something doesn't work, I have definitely DNF'd books. I've definitely set them aside to come back to, but I also do believe in, you know, some grit and sticking through and trying to figure out what is about this book. What about reading this book can give me, even if it's a story or a point of view that I haven't had before, even though in the case of like All the Lonely People, I didn't find it very well written. And at best, I roll on this bullshit, oh, woman doesn't say what she really wants kind of thing. But yeah, I think that was a bit of a of a rant at the end, as I reflect on, am I glad that I read all of those books all the way through? And the answer is yeah. I am. I'm glad that I had some spontaneous little short reprieves in there. I'm glad that I coupled up the setting. That really helped me along. And I think I will see if I can bring back a TBR video for the last half of February, to sort of maybe see if talking through what I'm reading and why. What I'm thinking right now is what's sort of sitting on my separate place of like probably most likely gonna read coming up, is also a lot of male authors, and I just think I just think that it is gonna throw me into a slump even if they're really good. So I might just have to shuffle them around a little bit. And I think that I can do that in a video likely. I also have another haul. It's another story, so maybe some haul videos coming along as well. So until next time.